Thank you, Chairperson. All the extreme examples, such as gambling, alcohol, smoking, are all legal acts. We don't ban those. It's double standard. States should never discriminate the weak by pre-assuming that they are all irrational. Democratic welfare should respect and represent choices of everybody equally and fairly. Their generic concerns about alcoholic or gambling, smoking are not necessarily inherent to welfare provision system. So I don't think their concerns are relevant to justify provision of welfare in form of goods and services. Based on this framework, I'd like to answer 3 questions in my speech. Firstly, how should we deal with addicts? Secondly, does their model defend the most vulnerable welfare receivers? Thirdly, should welfare prioritize subjective and cultural necessity over generalized demands? So first question, how should we deal with the addicts? Their basic concern is there are some welfare receivers who turn out to be alcoholic and tobacco addicts or gamblers. There are 4 rebuttals. Firstly, that's not relevant to the motion because states' free program for rehabilitation is not mutually exclusive. We are more than happy to educate those people. We are more than happy to provide free counseling mechanism for alcoholic and drug addicts, just like case of Australia. By the way, this is not relevant to the welfare system because even rich people are able to access those kind of programs. Therefore, we are happy to minimize those kinds of problems they are talking about in general. Secondly, even if some welfare receivers turn out to be addicts, that's short-term problem. Empirically, they understand that they will run out of income if they waste all the cash. In order to maintain their subsistence and try to escape from miserable lives, they need to spare some form of savings, if not all. Therefore, in a longer period of time, people gradually gain the ability of financial management and allocation. We know it's not going to happen overnight. It requires a time for those people to learn these processes. But this training itself is important rehabilitation process. Therefore, states should at least prioritize the rooms for rehabilitation for those people to gain ability of financial management. Number 3, considering all these overall behavioral patterns and behavioral tendency of welfare receiver, that is to say, they are not going to use and waste all the money, but spend some of the money for extra enjoyment. And why is it bad for individuals to prioritize smoking over other things? It's a matter of allocation and extent, and which is up to subjective value judgments. Even educated people like us with literacy use our capitals for dozens of high-risk investments, such as buying houses or studying abroad and so on. It is discriminatory to pre-assume that welfare receivers are all irrational, even though they have right to vote, just like everybody. State has to be equally accountable for choices and value judgment, regardless of economic activity. So we are fine with people spending their time and money for smoking, gambling, and alcohol, as long as it's their choice. Number 4, even if some people continue to be disproportionately addictive, it's the worst case scenario by the other side of the house. It is not a justification to make all welfare to be services rather than cash. So let's make a comparison between exception versus majority. Their case is that less than 1% of entire receivers become extreme addicts versus over 90% of welfare receivers are going to be properly and moderate receivers. So based on this comparison of exception versus majority, it is unfair to infringe a free choice of a majority of receivers because these people are not responsible for the limited case of abuse and addicts. So it is unfair to take away the rights of vast majority of moderate believers for the things that they are not responsible for. Thereby, in conclusion, states should prioritize the rights and interests of a majority of moderate welfare receivers. And we would like to hear any counter standard of a comparison from the other side of the house. Moving on to the second question of this debate. Does their model defend the most vulnerable welfare receivers? The best case scenario of the other side of the house is some people are better off. But what happened to the least well off? We believe, ladies and gentlemen, there are hierarchy among welfare receivers. Let me explain this in 2 ways. Firstly, the least well off, or the the social minority among welfare receivers. These people have to spend their money and time for religious practices or practices that the majority will never require, such as use money for halal, kosher, or vegetarian, or services in local church, or donation to local mosques, or children that require special mental treatment and practices, or language lessons for immigrant children, or preschool for children with mental instability. All these demands for minorities can never be represented in the process of welfare services or provision of material goods, because majoritarian definition of welfare systematically abandons and ignores a multiplicity of demands in diverse communities. Hence, they will cut off the most vulnerable and disenfranchised welfare receivers in the community. Second level, the harm to others by Deputy Prime Minister. What they have claimed in this debate is if parents subjectively choose the use of cash, that will necessarily create harm to children and family members. And this narrative creates a very dangerous social perception, because whatever choice economic minority makes is irrational. Whatever choice economic minority makes is harmful to other individuals in the community. If that narrative becomes predominant in a society, economic minority will even suffer more from social stigmatization in the community. And such a stigmatization exacerbates social division and economic disparity. So practical level, those economic minorities will face discrimination in job hiring process, for example. They are less likely to get employed in the community. We believe that kind of stigmatization caused by the narrative of irrationality of economic minority is necessarily damaging the well-being of individuals. Finally, about the principal justification, should welfare prioritize subjective and cultural necessity over generalized demands? So what the Deputy Prime Minister explained, the counter principle, is the basic necessity is different from extra necessity. But how do you draw the line between rudimentality versus additionality? So our counter principle is that cultural and emotional fulfillment is part of necessary welfare. That's exactly why there is a tax exemption upon religion and marriages. And for example, tax and religion and marriages seem to be additional fulfillment for individuals, but for some people, that is necessary and rudimentary part of their subsistence and cultural life. So those analogy of tax exemption on marriage and religion exemplify the fact that the democratic state financially promote and cultural and emotional happiness as well. And those choices can be seen to be unnecessary from the third party point of view. But it doesn't automatically mean that those choices should be deprioritized just because majority think it is not necessary for their society and community. That is why we respect libertarian choices for individuals. We are happy to oppose. Thank you.
Next remark. This side director for opposition advice.